Hello and welcome to the big. Oh, hang on. I don't know why that started. Somebody watching the video. There we go. That was me. I apologize, guys. I had viewing and production on, so that's my fault. Welcome to the Big 12 Mafia Holy Rivals show. My name is Nathan Bomber Brown. With me are a couple of my key contributors today, Immaculate View and Moen Sports. How you guys doing today?
Great. Looking forward to the show.
I think a lot of people are. Yeah, it's going to be a good one because we have a special guest with us today who's actually was my very first guest on my very first show that had a guest, and that's Jim Williams. How you doing today, Jim?
I'm doing fine, and it's great to be in this group of nice guys and very intelligent people. I don't
We,
spend a lot of
we
time around intelligent people at times, I can assure you.
well, we appreciate you being here. Yeah, we've only got Jim for about 25 minutes, so we want to get right into the show. Just I'll say this once: if you're new to the show, please subscribe, leave me a comment, give me a thumbs up, and then turn on your notifications, and that includes all your Twitter notifications, and that way you'll know when our shows are always on. The other thing is, if you want to leave a super chat, you have a question specifically to Jim that you want us to try to get in, it'll have to be a super chat because we have a bunch of stuff we want to go through, and the only way I'll defer to those today is if they're super chats. Otherwise, all the members that are paying, I always defer to those comments when we're later in discussion. All right, I'm going to jump right in here, and I'm going to go to the presentation of the text that Jim put out yesterday, which really was sort of an earth-shattering one coming from somebody of such stature. And just to sort of catch everybody up, we've been talking about, at least on my shows, we've been talking about realignment from the beginning, and then we've been talking about the way that these conferences will break down, and then we talked about Colorado and the rest of the Pac-12 breaking up. And one of the things we talked about right after that was the negotiating position that Washington State and Oregon State had in to sort of have leverage to possibly join the Big 12. Well, on the other side of the country, there's this other conference that's also sort of in turmoil. That's the ACC, and everybody knows that they brought in Stanford and Cal and let SMU write a check to join the conference. And at the same time, there were three schools that didn't vote for that extension, and that was Clemson, North Carolina, and Florida State. So with us right now is this tweet that Jim put out about a maybe reconstituted, a little bit more fortified ACC. Jim, do you want to kind of walk us through what this tweet meant and kind of
Sure,
what you were going for with it?
sure. Basically, the ACC is not forcing anybody out. Let's just begin with that, okay? But what they are doing, and they're being very proactive about it, is they're running through a number of scenarios of what would, what if some of their schools were allowed to leave, what would they do? And by the way, I did, there's Syracuse is there twice, which is a mistake. Wake Forest should be there. And I cannot read it, but if Tulane's not on there, they should be.
Yeah,
Uh,
I added Tulane. I took off the duplicate Syracuse,
yeah,
but what was the other one you just mentioned? Because I
Wake
didn't add that
Forest,
one.
Wake
Wake
Forest,
Forest. Okay.
not there. Um, anyway, the concept and the theory of the case for them is that one of the scenarios that they like, and we're talking about the members like, is I use the term loosely, an Ivy League-ish type situation where you've got a bunch of schools who are of like mind. They've got high academic standards. They are, um, they have good, strong boosters, and sports is important. Don't get me wrong; it is very important, but it's not as important as the academic aspect of it. Now that was something that was, obviously when you go to Stanford and a Duke and a Cal and Virginia and North Carolina and a number of those schools together, they're very much of like mind. it's also important to note that this is a Notre Dame's very engaged in all this. So, all of this has to do with what do we do in the future, because they want to protect themselves. They do not want to be in the situation that the PAC found themselves in. And so, the way to protect themselves from that is to run scenarios by their members that they feel the members are going to buy into. And this scenario keeps popping up in all the conversations I have with members of that conference and the people involved with the conference. So I decided that we could play some scenario and have a little fun with it, uh, with regards to what could happen, uh, using the exact scenarios that were presented to me. So that's what launched this thing yesterday.
And just as a follow up, and to get everybody a little bit of experience where Jim comes from, he's been in sports journalism for 40 years. Okay, everybody, he's won many Emmy awards. He worked for ESPN. He works for Forbes right now. So we're talking about somebody who's, I would say, a journalistic expert in this field. And you happen to also be a Southern Florida graduate, isn't that right, Jim?
Yeah, the University of South Florida. Memphis people are on my back about that, but everybody's got to be someplace, right?
All right. Immaculate, you got a question for him?
Well, first off, I'm going to have to ask the tough question here. We've got some folks, Jim, who are asking if there's any way you can maybe turn up your volume just a little bit. They all are dying out here to hear what you have to say, but they're having a little bit of trouble with that.
Let me bring the mic closer.
Oh,
That'll help.
I think that might be a little bit better.
How's this?
That's much better, Jim.
Oh, that is excellent.
Okay.
All right. Let me look at
My
the chat.
apologies.
No, you're good.
No, you're fine.
We may want to go over just a couple of those points here again, just for folks to really get into this. They're very interested in what you have to say, and then I'm not sure I could ask questions to do more than what you've already said.
Basically, the concepts, the ACC. I'll go far back. I actually did a Forbes piece. You can Google it if you like, and it had to do with the ACC and the PAC actually considering at one point in time either a merger or a partnership. And this was discussed last summer, and it was also discussed with ESPN involved. And so there was a lot of conversations, and these conversations have gone on, for the better part of the year. Well, they saw what happened to the Pac-12, and they were hell bent on not allowing that to happen to them. They were not going to, have this situation where, everybody cast an eye to another place. Where's a better place to go? I also put out something this morning which said that they are also exploring the possibility of eventually coming to a resolution where they would set a fee to leave the conference. But that's another conversation for another day. But this particular one, basically, it was the genesis of it had to do with regard to the schools wanting to be more academically in line with each other, where they can share research, and do a lot of work together in that realm, attracting the student who wants to be, who is academic first and sports second. And so that was the theory of the case. You've got Duke, you've got Stanford. Immaculate knows this. I mean, they've been together since Moby Dick was a minnow, so they've been around with each other, and they really have a good relationship.
Yeah, they're thick as thieves.
Yep, you've got Virginia's there. They've had relationships with both these institutions. Notre Dame is involved, so this is, I think, in conversations with everyone, the way the league will go eventually. Now, I do want to make two things very important that have to be brought out. One, nobody at the at the ACC is pushing anybody out the door. Okay, that is not the way this works. What they are doing here is running scenarios so they don't get caught flat-footed, or they don't overvalue themselves, or they don't have any random situations where everybody is upset with each other. They're trying to take what the Pac-12 did wrong and make sure they don't follow that process. And so that's where they are.
So we got a question here from R. Webb, who's one of our paid members, Jim. He says, why would he not have Rice in the mix?
Rice actually would be in the mix. Okay.
Okay.
I didn't have them there yet because if you see there, there was UConn on there.
Yes.
Okay. UConn is there until they're not, as the old saying goes.
Right.
UConn is there. We know that the Big 12 is interested in UConn. If UConn comes off the board, then Rice comes on the board. There's a couple things dealing with Rice right now, having to do with they're working to get a new president in place, and so there's a number of little issues there. It has nothing to do with Rice. Rice and SMU would be a perfect match. So I would expect that Rice would be there, and certainly Rice has the academics to make that work.
Yeah,
Okay.
and they already are gathering up money to refurbish their stadium, which is about 70K capacity. So they could become something in this type of a conference.
Oh, 100%.
So the next question, and it's sort of follow on. When we've talked about these two still outstanding issues, there's what's going to happen with the three schools that may want to leave the ACC. And then, of course, on the other side of the country, we have the Pac-12, now Pac-2, the lawsuit, the mediation they're talking about doing. And I believe in a follow-on tweet yesterday, you put, and we've talked about this on our show several times, about them possibly being in the mix to fortify the western part of the country for the ACC. We have a lot of people here from Washington State and Oregon State that are interested to know how likely do you think that happens? And I don't think anybody questions the fact that the legal stuff has to be sorted out first before we can even guess where they're going to end up.
Well, they're certainly in the mix. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
I didn't put them on there because I think I want to see how this whole legal issue gets settled first.
Right. Right.
So Immaculate and I were going back and forth yesterday, and I don't know if it was in DMs or online, but we were talking about the fact that we both think that the situation, and I won't speak for you. If I'm wrong on this, let me know.
Okay,
But
you're good.
the deal with Gonzaga is really a Trojan horse for
Right.
for the Big
Right.
12 because they're looking up there to find out what Washington State and Oregon State are doing. They deserve to end up in a major conference because if all you have to do is look at the top 25 in college football and take a look at where they are. They're doing phenomenal. And there's no reason to think that they won't continue to do so. They're fine institutions. So I do believe that they're going to end up either in the Big 12 or the ACC once this is all said and done, once the dust settles.
Very fair. Moen, do you have a question for Jim?
Yeah, Jim. I saw you have North Carolina State on this list and not Virginia Tech. If you were building a more academic conference, Virginia Tech does much more in research dollars than North Carolina State does.
Oh,
And
100%.
So why would you put North Carolina, and also North Carolina State would obviously be very desirable to either the Big Ten or the SEC, whoever misses out on North Carolina. So why would you include them on the list and not Virginia Tech? Is there a rationale for that?
The person that I spoke to at Virginia Tech was said that they're on the fence on what they want to do. In other words, there's a strong push from those who have remember how good Frank Beamer coached the team back in the day.
Right. They were very good.
And they liked the fact that that was it. But to your point, they built a phenomenal campus in Northern Virginia. With the idea that Q2, which is the Eastern headquarters for Amazon, was going to use a lot of their work. I mean, they're a phenomenal university when it comes to academics, and specifically in engineering and computer engineering. So there's no question about that. I only left them off not because they don't academically make it, just because I was led to believe that they may be more interested in being involved in sports. So for the time being, I just let them off. That doesn't mean that. And look, there's people on here that could be on here that aren't on here.
Right.
That I would be more than happy to say yes, you're right, 100%. And with regard to what you said about NC State versus versus Virginia Tech, I would say either one of them would be great to stay, or they both would, or I could see where, under the right circumstances, they would both leave.
Immaculate.
Yeah. Couple things real quick. First off, you mentioned something about research sharing. Have you heard anything at all about them talking about formalizing anything for this new setup? Maybe in like a BTAA or a connection to the IPLC or something like that?
Well, I know that there's been conversations stunning between Duke and Stanford.
Right.
Virginia and Stanford's had conversations. Cal's had conversations with the members. I mean, this was when they were involved early before the votes were going. I mean, the one thing the two institutions have to bargain with is their ability to get some of these schools even research dollars, and also get them into some research projects that they literally control.
And would you say that this list here is kind of malleable in terms of like discussions you've had, what have you done that because a lot of people are looking at a lot of different schools to be part of this possibly, and just for them to think that this isn't something that's set in stone, but this is just kind of the way they're looking forward, and however things go, it could change.
I would say this is firmly planted in silly putty.
Yeah. I like that. That's good. Let's run through a few questions from some of our watchers. Sergeant Pickles, one of our paying members, he says Ivy League split from FBS a long time ago because they said athletics couldn't compromise their academics. What you're proposing here would basically be the same. Would you agree with that, Jim?
Well, to an extent. I use the term Ivy League because of the fact that it's they would value academics over sports. There's the Ivies made it's I don't know, it's kind of like apples to oranges in that regard. But if you go to an Ivy League school or go to an Ivy League sporting event, believe me, they have it's a great time to go. I mean, I've been to many, and they're wonderful, wonderful events. But it's just a different vibe. And so I think what I'm saying here is these are state schools who are used to participating in sports and used to giving scholarships and having all that involvement. That was totally not what was going on with the Ivies. So I think this group could survive quite well and still be very competitive.
Right. Okay. Another question from Sergeant Pickles. I'm just doing these in order, everybody. Okay. So that's not for you, Jim. I'm letting everybody watching.
By the way, I think I follow Sergeant Pickles.
He's a fantastic guy. He's active. A UW guy. He's been a friend of the show from the beginning. He was one of my first subscribers, Jim. So I'm pretty loyal to those guys.
I love his stadium out there. And also, by the way, Michael Pennick is from where I grew up in Tampa. So
Oh, is he?
yeah,
Oh, I didn't know that.
it's a Tampa-based guy.
He also asks, and this is pretty much for a question everybody's been asking. We've been proposing from the very beginning that nothing happens with the ACC before the Washington State OSU stuff gets sorted out. Do you believe that's the case, or do you think it's still possible something could happen with the ACC first?
You mean with we're talking now about Washington State and Oregon State?
And the settlement, yeah, of the Pac-12.
No, I don't think they're gonna. I don't think any conference is gonna engage. Even the Mountain West is
Right.
engaging at this point. There's way too much exposure from a legal standpoint
Right.
to get involved in this, and so I think that they're going to let the dust settle there for a little while before they go into it, and I think that really, if there's something that's going to speed this thing along,
Right.
that might be one of the things. Is that that if you're going to the Big Ten or if you're going to the Big 12 or wherever you're going from this from the Pac-12, this is not something you want to bring along with you.
Right. I 100% agree. We got a few more minutes here with Jim. If you're new to the show, please subscribe, become a frequent viewer of our programs. We have a pretty good show here, and we have guests like Jim on quite often. Let's get a couple more questions. Another one from Rock Chalk. He says FSU, North Carolina, and Clemson leave. He's proposing leave first before 2026. Then the other teams stay in the ACC until the 2030s and explore Big 12 after that. ESPN gets most from that situation. Do you have any possible understanding of really what is the timeline for the ACC? Is it the 2026 college football playoff renegotiation? Is it the 2030-31 time frame when the Big 12 and the Big 10's media deals are all up? Or is it the end of the ACC contract all the way to 2036?
I don't think that they're going to want, look, the animosity, between FSU and Clemson and some of these schools toward the conference office is wearing on the conference.
Right.
It's not a good thing. I believe that they're going to go out and find a number. And I believe that number is going to be right around $250 million. And they're going to say, okay, you want out? Give us $250 million.
Ooh.
Okay, so $250 million. I'm not a mathematician, but $250 million for 4 schools is $1 billion.
Yeah, I got you. And I think you're about half what I said it might be, which was 500. I said that in July. So you're obviously more in line, probably $250 million, but that's a lot of money you could seed throughout the conference, right? That
Yep.
would help bolster people's money to make up for any shortfall that they might feel between them and the Big 12.
And that would be why these schools are being vetted now, so that
Right.
who are partnerships and things that are being done. One thing that I should note about when I say vetted, and this is something that I think is being missed, and that is when you're vetted, that can be a good thing, and it also can be a bad thing. Because when you do research into things, you may find out what you thought you would, you may find may find something there that you didn't think was there in the first place.
Right.
So it doesn't always end up being a good, most of the time, let's say it's a good thing, but sometimes you find out some of the dirty laundry you didn't know that was out there.
I think it's very fair. C. John has a good question here. He says, in Jim's option, meaning your opinion, what other universities on the list are at risk of needing contingency alternate, like Rice for UConn or Pitt, Miami, Virginia Tech, and Georgia Tech, if they possibly leave? Do you have any ideas of who those universities may be?
Well, again, you would have to go and take a look at a regional a regional team that would fit that um, it would fit what does each one of those teams that you're losing bring to the party.
Right.
Okay, so it's not like a one size fits all. It's like, okay, can I get a demographic or a media um, market that will fit the market I'm losing? Or
Okay.
can I bring something in that, and it may not be, let's say that, you know, we'll just pick Pitt for the moment. Let's say that Pitt decides to go and you need somebody to take Pitt's place. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going that place has to be in Pennsylvania or Ohio or in that region out there. It simply means you have to go and find something. And if anybody knows that, the West Virginia people know that better than anyone. That you
Right.
that sometimes backfilling doesn't mean down the street from you.
Right.
So they would just try to mix and match as best they could.
I think that's absolutely the best way you can look at it, is any options on the table, right? Nothing
Sure.
isn't an option. All right, well, I got one more question for you, and I think then we can let you go. I hate to. I wish I could keep you here for 2 hours, but I know how busy you are. But we'll get you on again soon, Jim,
Yeah.
either way.
Yeah. We can do that.
We'll finish with this question I think a lot of people have in their mind. They're really confused about the geography part. Let me read the question, and then I'll let you answer. Daniel Gygax says, what my question is why these schools want to have a conference that is very geographically spread out, and what would be the media value for this proposed conference? Meaning, would if their dollars change because you're losing Florida State, North Carolina, and Clemson, does that overall value just for the media deal, does it go up or down? Does it stay the same? So one's the geography question being so spread out. The second one is, what do you propose that the media valuation would be?
I don't think the media valuation would go below because they're on the cheap right now.
Right. They are. Yeah. It's hard to imagine them going
So
lower.
they're not going lower.
Okay.
So that I don't think that's a problem. I'm sorry, I can't quite read the geographic.
He's asking you, why have a conference that's so spread out? You're going to go all the way from Stanford to potentially UConn.
Well, because these universities basically are there to work with each other. As I said before, this is an academic and research situation. That would be their number one goal with sports. And second, I don't think that it's spread out. I mean, look at how much more spread out could the Big 12 be?
Right. It's true.
How much
Yeah.
more spread out? My God, how much more spread out could the Big 10 be?
Right.
So I don't think that that's necessary. That being spread out from a geographic standpoint is as important as who's in the conference.
Well, and with modern day conveniences, like we have now charter flights, right? You can go from airport to airport. You can fly into a Provo. You can fly into a Lawrence, Kansas. You can do those things direct. You don't have these long bus rides any longer. Doesn't that minimize some of the travel constraints that we used to have, say, even 10 years ago?
It does, but I think we're also going to see, and I think you and I have had this discussion.
Right.
We're going to see a lot of pod situations where
Right.
you're going to play games where people will come. We'll use Orlando, okay, as an example for Big 12, right? They have the ESPN Disney complex there, which is where the NBA did their during COVID, where the NBA stayed. Okay, you could play baseball, basketball, you can play whatever you want in Orlando, and you have five or six teams flying into Orlando. You could basically put up half a baseball season, and
Right.
a number of other sports. So I think the pod concept is where we're going to be looking, because it is costly, and you have to, I know we sometimes forget this, but you really have to look at the student athlete here. It's because only football, for most part, is charter.
Right.
Everybody else flies commercial.
Okay. Well, Jim, we really appreciate you being here. What I really like is the fact that all the ideas that we've been talking about and proposing for months, meaning my team here, to see you put out tweets yesterday that basically said everything that we'd been saying could possibly happen. I got to tell you, that made us feel really good, because we were talking about this in June. We were talking about this in July. We were talking about this in August. So,
in honesty, great minds think alike, and then there's me. So I've just listened to what you guys said and just decided, okay, let me go and ask these questions. No, seriously, it's always a treat to be with you guys. You guys are smart, funny, and know what you're talking about. So I will say this, and I'm not saying it because you guys are here. It's just that we have far more intelligent conversations on a deeper level than half the places that that do this. And
right.
there's no hot takes here. There's thoughts, and there's and I think that's why the audience appreciates it. They appreciate the fact that there's I'm not right 100% of the time. My wife will tell you that numerous without any help.
It's her job.
Okay, exactly. It's a full-time job.
Yeah.
But and I think that the fun part of this is that we all know that what we're doing here is trying to educate people, and not not trying to upset them or concern them. But when I put something down there, it's not me putting it there because I want it to happen that way. Otherwise,
Right.
USF would be at the top of that list, not
Right.
further down. But all kidding aside, it's we're doing because this is a passion of ours, and it's something we enjoy doing. So we all the people that follow you and are members of this group, and I appreciate the civility, and the debate has always been on a level that it never gets nasty, but it always ends up in people understanding where the others are coming from.
Well, I'll take that as a compliment. That's what
Absolutely.
we fostered, and we really appreciate it. So, Jim, I appreciate it. You have a great night, and
Okay, and
we'll
let me throw this to you. Just
sure,
if
yeah,
there's
go ahead.
Oh,
if there's any questions or comments or something that you want me to answer, because I do have to go. But
Right.
what if you send them to me? I promise I'll send them back to you, and then you can give them to give them to the gang.
Okay, that's
Okay?
a deal. Yeah, we'll take advantage of that. We're going to be going probably another hour or so. So if we
Well,
do, we'll definitely send those your way.
And I'll be more than happy to send them back to you, and you guys can post them however you wish.
All right, I appreciate that. All right, Jim Williams with Forbes and Zenger News, and friend of the show. We really appreciate it, Jim. Have a great night, and God bless.
Okay,
thanks, Jim.
Y'all have a lovely night, and it's good to be with you. Take care.
You too. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh, brother. We need clapping. Moen, what's going on? Where's my production assistant? Holy cow, that's loud. I'm not sure what that was. What was that?
I was like half underwater clapping.
My goodness gracious, that was loud. All right, anyway.
Well, I'm glad Jim left before that one hit.
Jim, thanks so much for being here. We really appreciate it. What's that, Moen?
People said they couldn't hear earlier, so I was,
Yeah,
all
okay.
good. Yeah.
They definitely heard. Here's Opie in the house. $25 for Jim interview. Thank you so much, Opie. Really appreciate it. Talk about a friend of the show, man. We have some amazing partners and people that are willing to come and spend their time with us. I just as a preview, I've got some upcoming interviews I want to let everybody know about. These are exciting. We're going to have John Canzano sometime in the next 2 weeks. We're just trying to work out a time. Greg Grubel, the sound and voice of BYU Cougars, is going to be here. And then Bob Thompson will be coming back soon once we get a little bit more settled with this ACC and Pac-2 negotiation stuff. So if you're new to the show and you don't know that we do big interviews and you think we're just talking heads, you're going to have your eyes opened up very quickly, because we're not about us. We're trying to ask questions for you guys and trying to be as introspective and exploring as we can. And we do not do gotchas. So that's not what we do. Thanks again, Opie. Man, you're a stud. We appreciate it. And I'm going to just do some shout outs here at the beginning of the show, since we didn't really have time to get that at the start. Let's get some people here that were here right at the beginning. And I'm going to take it just a minute or two and run through all these names, because we've had some amazing people in tonight. Holy cow, how many comments do we got? Maybe I can't even get to the top. All right, Summit Hawk and BR is here. They're both paying members. And then Summit Hawk again. Nathan Campbell was here early. Cougar Tracks, good to see you, Cougar Tracks. Eugene's a new member of the channel. Thanks for being here, Eugene. You've been a valuable asset to the show since you started watching. Let's see here. Sergeant Pickles is here. I saw Rebecca pop in a little bit ago. Patrick Viegel, I have a question that he had. I just didn't have time to get to, but I wanted to bring it up right now. Patrick says college football realignment is not about what teams deserve to be in a P4 conference. I'm going to let you answer that, Mo, and tell everybody what the difference is and why that's so important.
Well, Oregon State and Washington State, until something happens with them, nobody can do anything in the college football playoff. So if you want to consider that deserving to be in, that's kind of deserving to be in when you can hold up the business of everybody else.
And
Yeah.
And then quickly explain to everybody why schools like Vanderbilt, Purdue, Indiana, Illinois deserve to be where they're at, so we can quit having this argument about let's kick them out and then only have this many schools to play. And just tell everybody how much
you're not going to have a conference full of winners, people. Somebody has to lose games
every game.
And you know, these schools also are schools. They're not professional teams.
Right.
So you might say, well, Purdue doesn't bring anything to the Big Ten. Purdue brings millions, hundreds of millions of research dollars in engineering to the Big Ten. Indiana, which is a terrible football team, their university is one of the biggest medical researchers in leukemia treatments. These schools all bring something to the conferences they're in. And I know it's hard for people to understand the Big Ten mentality on this. We're not kicking out members from the Big Ten. If you're Big Ten, you're Big Ten for life.
Yep.
You have to choose to leave. And the last one that did that was the University of Chicago in, I want to say, 1936 or 37.
Wow.
Long enough that you don't have to be exact.
Exactly. Right.
It was a long, long time ago when somebody left the Big Ten. So,
okay.
And,
so you want to add anything to that, Mac?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Let me just finish.
No. Keep going.
You're go ahead. I thought you were done, Mo, and I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I mean and I understand what people on the outside looking in, but there is a certain brotherhood within the Big Ten, even for Maryland and Rutgers. Like anybody else, like we can shit talk Rutgers all we want, but nobody else better do it.
Right.
It's a situation like that. Like, yeah, that's we can run him down. He's our little brother, but don't you run him down or there's going to be a problem. So there is a lot of camaraderie and brotherhood within the Big Ten, even among rivals.
Immaculate, you want to say anything to that?
Yeah, that's basically the Big Ten. Folks kind of get stuck on the athletic side of it because that's what most people are paying attention to. But that's really not what all the Big Ten is. When you look at the Big Ten Academic Alliance, they're all very interconnected in terms of their research. They share their libraries for that. So much of their research that they have done is attributed to them has some work done for it actually by other schools. So the act of separating would be quite painful for them. Chicago, just back in 2013, I think, left the BTAA. They had been part of that for all these years after they left the conference. It was that big a deal for them. And it took them about 3 years, I think, to get fully unmeshed from it. And at that time, once they did, they actually joined the IPLC, which is Stanford and Duke and all those schools. But it's a whole lot more than just the athletics. So when you ask why are they there, part of their job in football, like it or not, is to lose. They carry other sports. They carry other things that they do with the conference. But their win-loss ratios in football is not going to get them kicked out of the school. If any of them want to leave, maybe something could be worked out. But that's a tough one to see.
Just going down through the list of people that are here tonight. Rock Chalk, Kyle A. Good to see you, Kyle. Kyle says, good evening, fellas. Glenn Lumen in the house from all parts unknown. Where are you now, Glenn? Leave me a note. Are you still in Oregon? Or did you move down to Arizona? I can't remember. Glenn Lumen says, great day for a show. Love Sports. I think you're new, at least. I don't remember. Do you remember seeing Love Sports around, guys? Good to see you, Love Sports. Appreciate it. OPD Don, obviously. Joey Z says, Moen looks like he's visiting from the future. Already knows of the if the Buckeyes repeat 28-30. What do you think about that?
I would love that.
Tony Lawson is in the house. Mike Smith, we already mentioned. PS Doff is here. BR again, Cougar Tracks. I just want to make sure I try to catch Timothy Green is new. He says, yes, I can't hear him either, or I can't hear him fine.
Yeah, that was back.
Jim speaks. Yeah, Jim speaks very quietly, just so everybody knows. He understands. Normally, he has his mic next to his mouth. It was just tonight. Was just a little bit farther away. And let's see if there's anybody else I want to shout out before I jump down to some new comments. S. Reed is in the house. And boy, Connor Johnson. Connor, I hope you like those questions we asked. I was trying to get some Washington State, Oregon State stuff out of there. Let's see. All right, let's just sum up. That's pretty good. So now, Dave Chauncey, he says Rice would be the third best school in the ACC behind Stanford and Duke. We're talking about academics, right, guys?
Absolutely would. Yeah, they are. It was kind of interesting that they weren't on the list. I saw that, but I realized it's a moldable, malleable list kind of based upon what happens in the future. But I definitely think Rice would be there.
Okay. Let's see here. John Holk, who's also new to the channel, I think, says, I think SEC would be first to pick up teams for the ACC. Can Jim talk about what he thinks the SEC is going to do? Sorry, we couldn't get to that while Jim was around, but I think we can kind of answer that. Moen, why don't you take that one?
No, the SEC will not be the first to pick up teams. I think the SEC will take North Carolina State, and they're going to try to get into Virginia. Whether that's Virginia Tech, if they whiff on that, they'll take Clemson.
Immaculate.
Well, it's going to be, we're going to have to watch this. Like, first off, the pack needs to just get finished. And I think once that happens, we're going to kind of get slammed with leaks, with talk. It's already starting. We're seeing that from Ross Dellinger, if anyone's seen his latest article come out. And it's basically pushing that the Big Ten and SEC are now working together. I tend to think that the Big Ten will probably be the one that you hear most from, and the SEC will try to play it out like they're following, but we'll see.
Don Gibbs had a question in the middle there. It says, fits with the theory that North Carolina State flipped its vote to Stanford for Stanford, Cal, and SMU for AAU support from Stanford and Cal. North Carolina State is Tier 1 Carnegie School ahead of Virginia Tech on Carnegie list. So what he's saying here is bringing them in, they said they would vote for them to get that AAU support. What do you guys think about that idea?
I agree.
I think it's a very fair estimation.
There's a lot of political plays going on. Yep.
Glenn Lumen's telling us where he is now. He's still in Oregon, but he's heading for back to the Philippines on October 26th. I hope you travel great, Glenn, and I'm sorry I couldn't catch you in Utah. Next time you're here, we will definitely get together, though. Okay. I'm looking forward to that. Let's see here. All right, we're going to work backwards. First, just to sum up, Jim told us that his list, he's going off of intelligence that he's talked to other people. He has a lot of contacts, especially on the eastern part of the country, and they're telling him right now the ACC is they're looking to expand as a protection against losing schools. However many schools that might be. Right now they did 3, but they could potentially be bringing in other schools. And the back end of that, the reason for doing that would be the academics. It would be an academic conference that would, they would still participate in high level in sports. The ACC would stay together, but they want to stay together as a group. Do you guys want to add anything to that?
I mean, there's not enough room for another pack explosion to happen, an implosion. There's just not. So some of these schools need to figure out, hey, we need a long-term plan. We're not quite sure exactly who's all going to go, but they probably have a pretty good idea. So I think it's great that they're actually thinking along these lines and trying to formulate. And the Stanford, California, and SMU move did indeed seem like it was part of a larger plan in order to get started on that. Those schools didn't have a whole lot of time to move. They had to figure out something quick. So everything's moving pretty quick, and we'll see how this works out.
Moen, you want to add anything to that?
No.
Okay. At the top of the hour, I've sent him a message he could come in earlier if he wanted to, because Jim wasn't able to stick around as long as I thought. But we're going to have an actual lawyer is going to join us. I can't remember what his first name is, but his alias on Twitter is Bodie McBeaver. Anyway, Immaculate and I met him on a Spaces that was put on by Digital Dam. When was that? Monday?
Yeah, it was
I
just a couple days ago.
It was just a couple days ago, and we're going to be talking about the Pac-2 mediation and what's going to happen with that contract, and obviously all the Pac-12 resources, the lawsuit, and all that stuff. So if you'll stick around for 15 minutes, he's supposed to be here, and I think that conversation is going to be really enlightening, because we're going to actually ask legal questions, like what is actually going to go on here and what are the next steps in this realignment stuff. So as we're waiting for him to join us, let's just get through a few more comments. Here's one from Ron. Go ahead, Immaculate.
I was just going to say, if you say he's coming on here today with us,
yeah,
I know there's been a couple of people that have mentioned if you were going to open up lines, they'd love to call in. I don't know if you're willing to do that.
We have 12 minutes. If you guys would like to join the show for just a few minutes, we can do that.
Joe's, if I say this last name right, Jose was asking earlier.
I just posted the link. If you want to join the show for a few minutes, just click on that link, follow the commands, and join us. I'm happy to take on a couple questions. It's a good time to do it. In the meantime, our web says, guys, watch your Mark Gonzaga and the Big East contract to expire in 2025. Not say, just saying. So I thought it was very interesting that Jim said that was a bit of a, what did he call it? What were the exact words? The Gonzaga thing is a bit of a.
Well, he said Trojan horse. I wouldn't agree with that terminology, but I think what he's trying to say is that it's not. No, I know what you're saying. It's not actually about Gonzaga. They're just
right,
without saying that they're looking at OSU and WSU because they're in the middle of a lawsuit.
Right. Yeah. Totally agree. Cleveland Rocks, who's also a paying member. Good to see you, Cleveland. He says, watching you live at the Atlanta airport. Truly enjoy listening to all of you. Great takes. Thank you so much, Cleveland. You've been a valued member of the family. We really, really appreciate it. I put the link in there. If you guys want to join us for a few minutes, come ask a question, just click on the link. We basically got 10 minutes here that we could fill, but I want to answer questions if we can. Let's see. John Hawk says he doesn't have a conference, just a football fan. We're all football fans, I think. Let's see here. If there's any others. Here's another one. Why do I think, maybe he says, why do you think SEC will pick first? Why do I think SEC will pick first? Because I don't see the ESPN will allow big brands to get away from them and from this period of a realignment. And previous ones, TV Network, have a lot to say about it. So let's just put that down. That's a fight between ESPN and Fox. Fox, NBC, CBS, the whole conglomerate versus ESPN. What do you guys want to say why Fox and the Big Ten get to eat first?
Moen might be able to touch on that.
Moen, do you want to?
They're going to make him an
I'm
offer.
going to
he
make
can't
him an offer
refuse.
he can't refuse.
Say that one more time.
ESPN can't. Hold on.
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
There we go.
ESPN can't just assign ACC teams. It's called market allocation. It's an antitrust violation. Those teams have to come to the open market first. The Big Ten is going to be able to pay them more and offer them more of an incentive to join the Big Ten conference.
Okay. You think they're going to offer money, more money?
I think they're going to offer to pay out some of the similar to what they did with Maryland, where they're going to get advanced loans that are going to be 0% loans.
Okay. To get out of the ACC.
Right. Get out of the ACC. That'll likely never be paid back.
Nathan Campbell says, Bomber, other than research, what does Nebraska bring to the Big Ten? Big Ten boys, answer that.
Well, the intention was for them to help try to balance out the conference. Unfortunately, they ran into some internal issues there after they joined, but they were supposed to be there to bring a major football brand to the West. At the time when they joined, they were part of AAU, although Michigan and Wisconsin knew very well that that wasn't going to last. But that was supposed to be it. We had Penn State join, and then for a long time, we were working with an odd number of schools for our scheduling. So Nebraska coming in helped even that out. And so for the schedulers of the conference, that also helped alleviate a headache.
I'm just sending Bodie another message. Okay. Yeah, Nebraska, obviously, they're cautionary tales. Let's talk about the schools that have moved that haven't done so well. I mean, there's a few, right?
There's a few. But
Missouri hasn't won an SEC East.
No.
Or sorry, West. You've had
they never really won the Big 8 all that much either, though, or
right.
the Big 12. I do believe that the transfer portal and the NIL will become evening grounds for some of these schools that, stepped into new situations and had a little bit harder time getting into it.
Joe Z, who's one of our viewers. Good to see you, Joe. Do you have a question or a comment?
Gentlemen, thank you so much for allowing me on your show. Fantastic.
Yeah, go ahead.
What you got for us, buddy?
Just been wondering with the Pac-2, as far as any Midwest team mergers, as far as schools having any incentive to go to a Pac-2 that doesn't have a media deal currently, would CBS continue their estimated, I don't know what it's about, 5-6 million per year per school? Like, what incentive would any Midwest school have into going to the Pac-2 who has no media deal, or would CBS currently just carry on over and incorporate Oregon State and Wazoo and with that same deal?
So you're talking about like the Mountain West?
Correct. If there was some type of merger where they were to go into the Pac-2, the Pac-2 doesn't have any current media deal. So would CBS extend that current media deal, or would they have to rewrite it from scratch?
Hey,
one
thing real quick. Joe, could you mute the volume on YouTube where you're watching us? Not that one.
He's fine. It'll work. Go ahead, Immaculate.
All right, I was just saying because we were getting the echo effect.
As far as renegotiation for the Mountain West contract, what they're talking about doing is doing a reverse merger, so they keep the Pac-12 assets, right? They keep the name, but they bring the media deal over from Fox and CBS. Do you hear me, Joe?
I think we're getting technical difficulties. So yeah, so the Midwest schools would essentially retain what they're making now through 26 when their media deal is then up. It's sounding like the CFP voting members, including Sankey, have no interest whatsoever in allowing them to retain their autonomous status. I'm not sure if the Mountain West schools are hoping for a long shot that they might retain that, and that maybe was the reason, but it doesn't seem that there's really any traction being gained there on their part.
Mute your mic for a second, Joe. There you go. Perfect. The problem with that is that you're talking about adding an additional 10 schools to a power conference. Already we're over like 67, I think. You add SMU. And so it's the number is really, really high. So the chance that they reconstitute the Pac-12 and keep the autonomous or the power ranking past 2026 is going to be pretty small. Their best option would have been, if they wanted to keep the Pac-12 together, would be to take pieces of the AAC and the Mountain West and constitute something that has the best brands in it, and then potentially make an argument to keep that ranking. But right now, I haven't heard a lot of people that are optimistic that would happen. Immaculate or Moen, you want to add anything to that?
So we're talking about like a Mountain West Pac type of situation?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think what they tried to want to do is add on as much or keep as much of the values they could and bring in the Mountain West. But when most of your conference is basically the Mountain West, there's not going to be a whole lot of looking at it any different than that. As far as CBS, it's not even like a full-on CBS deal. I know that there was like a certain number of games that they had to put on CBS, but mostly it's the CBS Sports Network.
Yeah.
And that doesn't get great coverage. And from what we've kind of heard, they may actually even just let that go. They bought that that was a different service. They bought it, tried to make the most of it. So in terms of them, making a big future play with that, I tend to think not, unfortunately.
All right, Joe, thanks for the question. I really appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you, gentlemen. Fantastic work.
All right. Thank you.
Appreciate
Bye-bye.
it, Joe.
Yeah. So when you join the show, everybody, just make sure you mute the YouTube that you're watching because we get reverb when that happens. Pickles, let me unmute you here. You're good to go, Pickles. How you doing?
How we doing, everybody?
Good. You got
Good.
a question for us, or what do you want to talk about?
Oh, my mind is completely absorbed by Duck Week, as you can imagine. But
I bet.
thought I'd pop it. I am waiting for Big Ten. You're gonna hear my son in the background. He thinks that's funny. Big Ten fans are not prepared, I think, for the full fury of Duck Week because we say some pretty out of pocket stuff to one another.
You may not know Ohio State fans.
Have you seen Ohio State, Michigan?
You see this guy down here?
Yeah, no, I'm aware. I'm just saying that this is. I know what they're like. The weird thing is Ohio State and Michigan fans to none of the other are generally pretty friendly. They talk a lot of crap, but deserved in most cases. But yeah, I think that there are some people underestimating that this will be a Michigan-Ohio State light of sorts. As far as the level of just craziness.
Well, let's be clear though.
Bringing up ancient history stats.
But let's be honest, Pickles. Let's be honest. You and me, who are both from Washington. Let's talk about rivalries.
Yeah.
In the back of your heart, which is the real rival? It's not been Oregon. Historically, it's always been the Apple Cup. So you guys are trying to gin up something that's relatively new. I can put a date to it. It's 25 years old since Nike started giving money to the Oregon Ducks. They were a joke before then.
It's different for me.
It's always
different
been
for me because I was just a kid. I was just a kid in the pre-Nike era, so it really didn't sink in for me. Oregon was just another team.
Right.
And I think state rivalries are always pretty nasty, usually, but I think you get so much crossover, specifically in Washington, because there's a lot of Coug fans in the Seattle area. It's not like you have all the Cougs are on one side of the state and all the Huskies are on the other, and we never really speak. You intermingle with each other every day, so I think you get families that are split like mine, where half are Cougs and the other half are basically Huskies.
Yeah.
Right.
And I don't think that exists in certain parts of the country where they're physically divided by geography. Like, I mean, I don't know. Is Iowa State
Nope,
pretty
that's-
split geographically?
I was
or
going
is
to
it
say,
mixed?
I mean, my father was Iowa State. So, I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it is exactly like that in Iowa. And there are some that hate that, but it's kind of like it's not a real hate. It's just, hate. But yeah, I could see that for you guys where I would say it is a bigger rivalry, Washington State. But what you're talking about is like
This
a
is hate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, the Apple Cup is like kind of the more, you love it because it's tradition. And I'm actually pretty bummed out that it sounds like it's not going to continue on. I don't
Make
know
it a
why that
surprise.
is. You think
I
so?
think one thing, if we can get Washington State and Oregon State into either the ACC or the Big 12, I think that can continue because it'll be a power conference game.
Well,
The only reason,
director,
I read what he said. But I think he's talking about the fact that they're not in a power conference after this year. So
yeah.
if they get into a power conference, I think the Iowa State's played every year, and
Yeah,
except for
but
a couple of years,
even
BYU
something like
Utah was
Bedlam
played
isn't
every year.
guaranteed to continue. So
Yeah, but that's Oklahoma.
Just to let you know, in the Big Ten, they stated that they are trying to maintain rivalries like Iowa and Iowa State. Like those games will be maintained. So I agree. Like if Washington State ends up in the Big 12, which I believe it will happen, I do believe the Apple Cup will continue. Now, everyone's got to go through this stressful period of like, oh my God, it could go away. And maybe it could, but I think it'll work out in the end.
yeah, he made some kind of weird statement about, oh, we need, to basically financially survive more or less. The pitchers
Have
made, oh, we need 7 home games a
Seven
year.
home games, yeah.
Right, but
But,
that instantly triggered me because I'm like, on the years where you have 5 Big Ten games at home, you can still play that game in Pullman and have 7. So I don't really understand where the panic was coming from, but maybe I misinterpreted that.
well, I think there's some anger right now because the whole Pac-12 assets deal. I think that
Oh,
there's
absolutely.
real anger. The fact that Washington State and Oregon State are eating them, and I'm talking about the states themselves, the politics, the legislatures are eating themselves alive over this lawsuit, stay of execution, the all the negotiation that's going on. I think you're getting a lot of that. I think a lot of that will start to moderate once they get settled, get the whole thing done.
Yeah,
And
I don't see this
6
ending
months,
in anything other than a settlement because I don't think you could legally claim that, oh, all the leaving members have relinquished any right to the assets, but I don't think you
Right.
can claim that they have the best interest of the 2 remaining members at heart. So,
Right.
I don't foresee a scenario where this goes to a full-on judgment because if they rule against Oregon State and Washington State, they're up a creek without a paddle. They're screwed.
I think
Yeah,
a lot of
that's
what we're
very
seeing
true.
is. I'm sorry. I think
Go
a lot
ahead.
of what we're seeing is just leverage plays. Like it plays out in public, so it gets everyone a little freaked out. But it's kind of leverage for those mediations, for those negotiations, and
Yes.
it's not about it not happening. It's about, okay, what are we getting and what are they getting? You're trying to get increments more, and so
Right.
you had the motion to interfere, possible motion to dismiss. All these different moves are to get a little bit more, to get a little bit better play.
All right, I gotta
Yeah.
let you go, Pickles. We got
No worries,
we got
guys.
our lawyer coming on, but thanks for being here. Really appreciate it.
All right, no worries, guys. Quack is still whack, and go Dogs.
All right,
Good
go
to see you,
Dogs.
Pickles.
Go Huskies. We'll see you later. All right, Bodie, you need to connect again, man. I just didn't have a chance to bring you up. Ryan, if you want to stay in the background, you're welcome to, but I gotta bring in Bodie. He's our guest, just so you know. I got
There he
Ryan
is.
Thomas. I got Ryan Thomas also on the horn, but Ryan, I can't bring you in right now because we had this scheduled up, but we might have time at the end of the show if you want to stick around. Bodie, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Sorry, they don't teach you how to use phones or electronics in law school. So
That's
So,
totally
you're like
fine.
the rest of us then in that regard.
All right, so let's do some introductions. Me and Immaculate met you on that Spaces the other day,
Yep.
and we were both, we didn't talk about this, but we were both. It was interesting. We both had the same thoughts, just thinking it separate. That you were really good at explaining what's going on with his negotiated settlements and the lawsuit and the motions to stay and all this other stuff. So we thought you'd be a good person to bring on and discuss that. So first, you want to introduce yourself to everybody, and then we can sort of jump right
Sure.
in.
So my real name is actually Ross.
Ross.
I'm
All right.
I'm obviously, if you can't tell, a Beaver fan.
We can see it on the wall behind you. Yes.
Yeah, my wife, my wife and I, who are both graduates of the Harvard of the West, 1994. She hand painted that for me, actually.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very good.
And I'm a lawyer here in Oregon and Washington. I've been practicing for 24 years now, I think it is. So
Okay.
I've got and I've handled a lot of cases that are, significant. I mean, every case is significant, I guess, but really, ones that affect a large number of people. So I'm kind of familiar with how these things, how this type of litigation kind of works.
All right, very good. Before we jump in, we do have a new member, and if you know these shows at all, you kind of got to make sure these new members are celebrated. So S. Reed. That's still loud, Moen.
All right, I'll cut it down.
That's all right. Thank you, S. Reed. You've been around for a long time. We really appreciate you being part of the family, and I just appreciate you being here. Thank you very much for signing up as a member, and I'm looking forward to having you be around a long time and asking your questions. I'm just going to leave his name up there for a minute so everybody recognizes who he is. Okay, so this is the question that I had once you were talking. You gave a good explanation. Right now, where is the lawsuit? Where are we with Washington's sort of countersuit? And just catch everybody up to where all of that is going right now.
So in Whitman County, OSU and Wazoo filed suit back in September. We've got the temporary restraining order basically saying the conference can't do anything unless everybody agrees.
Right.
And so they then set up what they call a briefing schedule, where there's a date where the Oregon State and Washington State had to file their memos or briefs, legal briefs outlining their legal arguments. The Pac-12 and Kliavkoff had to file their briefs or memos. And there was also a deadline for a day for any parties that wanted to intervene to let them intervene. And that was, I believe, Monday.
Okay.
And so the University of Washington filed a memorandum, or excuse me, a motion to intervene. The Pac-12 filed a motion to dismiss the case on Tuesday, yesterday, and the other, I guess, 9 schools, what I call the traitor schools, they filed an amicus, friend of the court, an amicus brief in support of the Pac-12's motion to dismiss, and in support of allowing the University of Washington to intervene. And the Pac-12's arguments are interesting, but I'm not sure they're going to carry the day.
Immaculate Moen, you have a question?
I have 2 questions, actually. One's going to be a little bit longer, and the other one's very quick. But we got to ask the tough questions here, so I got to ask this: how much trouble did you get in when you started to cover up that wall with all of those shelves?
Yeah, right.
Married men want to know.
This right here is
you got in trouble.
Yeah, that's right. This is a picture of our first national championship in baseball in 2006. Of course, I've got my Christmas decoration up already.
Nice.
Yeah, right.
Well done. Well, my other one is, I tried to go into this online. There's some lawyers who are chiming in, and I got a little brief reaction, but I thought I'd ask you. Now, I know you're going to have a little bit of a bias in this, but I think you can still probably take a good look at this. With those briefs coming in by all 9 schools to support Washington in their motion, does it at all have any play legally? Not just in our perception, but legally,
Oh,
that they are with that kind of saying that they're not represented by the PAC either, or anything legally that can be said by OSU, WSU that this shows that their interest is not actually in the PAC.
well, so the motion to dismiss is based on a couple of things. Number one is, well, you haven't joined the other 9 schools, 7 of which are public institutions, and you don't have, and the state court doesn't have jurisdiction over other state institutions. I'm not sure I agree with that necessarily, because what we're talking about here is a voluntary, like they said many times, a voluntary association to which the parties do not have to join, but they do so, again, voluntarily for a proprietary purpose, a business purpose. This isn't, some, charitable purpose, or what. This is a business for them.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure that I necessarily agree with that. Plus,
Okay.
You've got University of Washington, who's trying to intervene as a party, who is representing and going to make all the same arguments that the other that their fellow trader schools are going to make. So I'm not sure that is going to carry the day. The other argument they make, and this is a really curious one, is they claim there's a long-standing tradition of allowing voluntary associations to interpret their bylaws the way they want to interpret them. And so I actually read the briefs and everything today, and the cases they cited don't say what they say the cases say. In other words, in my view, they've misrepresented what most of the cases actually say.
Do you think that's purposeful, do you think that's purposeful, or do you think that's just a,
that's
lawyer mistake?
It's got to be no, I think it's on purpose. It's got to be.
Yeah, I mean, they can't. They cite 4 cases, 2 California cases, 2 Washington cases. The 2 Washington cases they cite are fraternal organizations, which were punishing their a member, or kicking them out. That's not the same thing we have here. There's Washington case law out there that says, no, if there's a dispute about interpreting the bylaws, we can get involved. Absolutely. Okay. The other 2 cases, one of which is the Oakland Raiders versus the NFL, and that had to do with interpreting a mandatory arbitration provision, but it didn't have to do with the rights of all, at the time, 28 NFL teams. The point is that the cases, I think, are inopposite and don't really help their case. Like I said the other night, all of this is legal posturing for purposes of mediation. When you go to mediation, everyone has to have something to lose. Pardon me. And if everyone doesn't have something to lose, you're not going to get a resolution. So they filed this motion to dismiss so that during mediation they can say, well, you're not guaranteed to prevail. And right. So there is a risk for you. And they would be right. I like our case better than their case, but I'm not the judge. And so I don't necessarily, my opinion matters about as much as anyone else's probably. But I certainly like Oregon State and Wazoo's case a lot better than theirs. The other thing they brought up in their motion is the interpretation what they call Chapter 2.3, which is a provision that says if you provide notice of withdrawal before August 1st, 2024, you don't have a seat at the table. What they're arguing now is that means notice that you are withdrawing before August 1st, 2024. And as opposed
I saw
to,
that too. I thought that was complete whack, by the way.
Yeah.
Because they did
it's
the
very
exact same
interesting
thing.
because the biggest
Yeah.
problem they have is with how they treated USC, UCLA,
That's right.
and Colorado.
That's right.
When they said that when you told us you were going to be leaving after
Exactly.
August 1st, 2024, you lost your seat at the table.
Exactly right. Yeah.
So I think
so
that's a
doesn't
tough
that
argument.
undercut their own case? They wanted it one way, but not the other. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yes. Yeah.
But at the
I
same
think it
time,
does.
what's their jeopardy though? And Moen, I know you had a question too. Just really quick, what's their jeopardy if they lose this? What is the actual jeopardy if these 10 schools who already said they're leaving, going to bigger and better things? What do they really lose?
What they lose is the ability to vote on the board of directors. So essentially,
Okay.
you'd have a board of directors running the Pac-12 of just Oregon State and Washington State. They would still be members
Right.
of Oregon State and Washington State. Of the Pac-12, pardon me. They just wouldn't have a vote.
Okay.
And what the concern of the trader schools is that, well, then OSU and Wazoo are just going to gut the conference,
Right.
which is a dumb argument, if you ask me, and for a couple of reasons. Number one, as members of the board of directors, they have an obligation under California law that because that's where the Pac-12 was organized. They have an obligation to act in good faith for the benefit of the members.
Okay.
Okay. Number two, if they were to gut and destroy the Pac-12 or at least harm the other schools in some way, shape, or form, or just blatantly take everything for themselves, nobody else is going to want to be affiliated with them.
That's what Bob Thompson said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that makes no sense, especially if what we're publicly saying is we want to, maintain and help the Pac-12. Why would we do something like that? So
Yeah.
those are, I think, pretty short-sighted arguments made by the schools that are leaving.
Well, we are
Okay.
talking about Kirk Schultz, but no, just kidding.
Moen, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, Bodie. Have you ever argued any cases in front of that district court?
No, I have. Oh, you mean in Whitman County? No.
Okay. Any familiarity with some of their decisions in similar cases to this?
I can't say no. No, this is not a common type of case that would appear in Whitman court, in Whitman County Court. It's a small town court. It would typically these types of cases would be in a county like Thurston County, which is where I believe Olympia is, or I live in Marion County, Oregon, and so cases involving the state are typically here, where the state capital is, Salem. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say that there probably aren't many cases like this that are argued in Whitman County.
And then Moen, last night, didn't you say that you kind of thought that, yeah, there made some sense in those schools that haven't physically left since August, that they would?
I think the trader schools, again, I bring it up intent and not action. They intend to leave the PAC conference. They have not left yet. There's a difference between leaving your wife and divorcing your wife. This is a
What do you
legal
think?
separation in my point of view.
What do you think about that, Bodie?
I don't know that I agree with that. I think, I understand there's a legal significance between the two, but practically speaking, there's no difference. And I think that's the way that the court's going to look at it. So this really gets into the weeds a little bit, but there's two types of cases, if you will. There are legal cases, which are based on statutes or constitutions or case law or whatever. And then there are what are called equitable cases, cases in equity. And what that suggests is exactly the term is exactly what those types of cases are. Basic fairness. Okay. Is this fair? Is what's going on fair? It asks the court to look at all of the circumstances and decide what's fair. And technically, we're in a court of equity. These are all equitable claims. Well, the breach of contract isn't, but the rest of the claims are equitable claims. And Oregon and Oregon State and Wazoo are basically coming to the court saying what they're doing. I mean, I'm oversimplifying it, but they're basically saying it's not fair. We want you to apply basic principles of common sense and fairness and equity and all that other garbage to rule in our favor, basically. And so the question, for instance, what does notice of withdrawal before August 1st, 2024 mean? Well, the court's going to look at prior conduct of the parties, what's a fair and equitable result for the Pac-12, what's fair and equitable to the departing schools, so on and so forth. And I think a court's going to look, and based on my experience dealing with judges around the state of Oregon and up the I-5 corridor in Washington, is the court's going to look at this and say, you know what, you guys provided notice. You told the world you're leaving. You're leaving. How can you legitimately claim that you have the best interests of the Pac-12 at heart when you've already got one foot out the door? You're just trying to get the car and the microwave and the big screen TV. No, you left. Go.
Okay. Ryan, you had a question. And by the way, Ryan Thomas to the show. He's a friend of the show, and he knows some legal stuff. He definitely knows contracts. So, Ryan, did you have a question for Bodie?
No, I mean, he's very helpful here. I mean, certainly, and the only thing I'd have to say is, I mean, this thing, it's basically going to be in the courts in the state of Washington. I mean, that's sort of where this is. I mean, I think, I don't know if Bodie agrees. I don't really see any diversity of jurisdiction here because my understanding is that unincorporated associations are considered residents in the states in which each of their members reside. So, I mean, I think the Pac-12 and then the University of Washington and Washington State. I mean, this thing is going to be is going to be in the courts in the state of Washington. And generally, my understanding is it's been a long. I don't litigate. I just deal with tax stuff. But I mean, I understand and Bodie can correct me here. But I mean, once a case is sort of decided in a state, state court in another state court's not going to hear a case that's, a similar case that's been already decided already. So
That's correct, especially one that's already decided the rights of the respective parties.
yeah.
And what the the trader schools are basically saying is look, whatever ruling you have, Judge Libby, with respect to Oregon State, Washington State, and the Pac-12 is going to affect our rights too. Now, if I was Judge Libby, I'd say, well, then intervene. You can intervene. The only reason why you're not intervening is because you've decided, because you're playing games. Because that's really what they're doing. They're playing games. And so we don't want to submit to the jurisdiction of the court. Okay, fair enough. Then you guys can deal with my ruling if you file a subsequent action in another court. But I can tell you too, at least at the federal level, I can't say for certain in California, Arizona, Utah, or Colorado, But in the federal courts, if somebody were to file a case in San Francisco or Phoenix or wherever, the federal court will likely abstain from doing anything until the Washington court rules, which is very helpful, which is why they filed in state court, I believe, ultimately, is because they knew that would preclude the other schools from going to federal court.
Well, and
So
weren't they on the nice edge of actually blowing the whole conference up if they hadn't have done something? There was
yeah,
the timing was they conceivably could have held a board meeting and dissolved the conference.
that's exactly right. They had a board meeting scheduled for, I believe it was September 13th.
Like a Wednesday, right?
Yeah, it was a Wednesday, and what they were planning on doing is voting on, basically dissolving the conference and wrapping up, dealing with the assets and distributions and everything
Right.
else. That's what necessitated the lawsuit and the temporary restraining order.
Well, and hadn't Washington State and Oregon State in the previous 2 months been requesting data about the
Yes.
conference so that they could find out what the disposition of those assets were?
Yeah, and Klyavkov kept saying, I don't know, I don't know, I don't
Right.
know. And for anyone who's followed the Pac-12 for the last 10 years, 12 years probably, that's not a surprise. I mean, it's been a complete and total grease fire.
Right.
And so it's actually you kind of unfortunately believe Klyavkov when he says, yeah, I have no idea, when he was, responding by saying, I have no idea. He might have been telling the truth because he might not have had any
Right.
clue. But it's true, they were not forthcoming with information.
This question from Rebecca, who's a University of Washington grad, by the way. So I'm just setting the stage. She's saying they're supposedly in mediation too. How does this affect that? Meaning, it's the stay has been had. Now they have gone into what's been everybody placed all their legal briefs in, and now is it technically in mediation yet, or is there still a phase that we're in that's transitory?
They've been in mediation since October 2nd.
Yeah.
Is that right, Bodie?
Yeah, they've been in
Okay.
mediation since October 2nd. And my guess is that it's been what's called a structured mediation. Maybe not. I mean, but basically what you do is the mediator or mediators, usually it's only one, will, basically go to one side and listen to their presentation, whatever they have to say. Basically you put on your case. You go to the other party or side, and that gets, they put on their case, and then the parties, literally you'll have one person on one side in one room, one side in another, and somebody going back and forth, and they'll have a list of the issues that have to get resolved, and they'll
Right.
just start going down the list. Okay, here's how we're gonna resolve this one. Okay, now we're working on this one today, or this whatever, so that eventually you get to a point where you get a resolution that nobody likes. If you get a resolution that nobody likes, you've done a good job.
That's a good job. Yeah, I've heard that before.
I don't know.
Immaculate.
Bruce,
Immaculate has a question, Ryan. Hang on
go
one
ahead.
second. Yeah,
I was actually
Immaculate
just
and then Ryan.
bringing up Dave Johnson in chat. We also, some of us, you may know him as Attorney Dave on some other call-ins. And when he asked this question, I didn't really know much to think about, but I'm like, that might be a good one to pass between two lawyers. So could this end up being a receivership or some other sort of court overseen process is his question for you.
It would be a receivership. I doubt it, just because. So a receivership in the context of a corporate problem, corporate operation of a corporation, is usually when there's an impasse. And it's most common when, in the Pac-12, say you had 6 on one side, 6 on the other, and they just couldn't come to an agreement. You'd file suit, and the court would appoint a receiver who would then basically operate the company. That's the most common, obviously, bankruptcies and stuff like that. But this isn't an instance where there's an impasse. There's a disagreement between, two legitimate schools on one hand and the 10 traders on the other about who gets to vote. Once the court resolves that, Pac-12 will be able to operate. It's just, are Wazoo and Oregon State going to have all the control, or are they going to be on the table, not at the table? That's just that's the way it's going to work.
Okay.
So
Ryan?
I don't see a receivership or a trustee appointed or anything of that nature, because the Pac-12 can operate. It's just who's the one pulling the trigger.
Right. Ryan, did you have a comment?
No, I mean, it just reminds me of all those books, negotiation books, like getting past no, getting to yes.
How to get to yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I mean, just along the lines of this, I mean, this is probably more or less kind of like Bomber. This is kind of like parallel tracks.
Right.
I think like the going to trial and having this litigate is like the nuclear option. That's like
Yes.
if all else fails, they're going to drag this out in litigation, and
But nobody wants that because they don't want discovery.
yeah, I mean, but at the same time, though, I mean, nobody wants it. But if one side's not going to, capitulate to make any concession whatsoever, then they may be willing to take that risk. But then again, I mean, I think that probably you're going to see some sort of resolution. I don't know, and Immaculate's pointing this out as well. There's a lot more going on here. I mean, we're talking about probably $640 million over 2 years in CFP money that I'm sure that other conferences would like to divvy up amongst themselves. And there's a whole bunch of things that ultimately,
It's in everybody's best interest to get the
yeah,
things out.
it is. I mean, you have to make it worth whoever. I personally think that Oregon State and Washington State will probably end up in either the Big 12 or the ACC, depending on
Yeah.
depending on what happens. I just really think that is having them go there takes care of a lot of issues, because at that point, if all 12 of them have a home, I don't really care. I don't think it really becomes an issue of who can vote and who can't. They're all just going to agree to dissolve and go their separate ways if everybody has a home.
Right.
So I mean, it's sort of, it's sort of really what does either um, um, why am I forgetting Jim's name in
Jim
the ACC?
Williams,
No, the ACC commissioner.
Jim Phillips.
Jim Phillips. Yeah, it's just what does Jim Phillips and Brett Yormark? I mean, what makes it worth their while? And I think that's what needs to be figured out. But I mean, it just makes too much sense for this to. I think that at the end game, it's just a lot easier for the Pac-12 to go away altogether. If you're the remaining P4,
I'm
that's
sure that's true.
Yeah.
that's the best answer. And I think at this point, they can certainly squabble all they want, but I think that something needs to be, like I said. I mean, it's 2 years, but $640 million. I mean, the question is it cheaper to pay pro rata for Washington State and Oregon State over the next 7 years than it is to pay that much money up front?
Yeah.
And
One thing I'll say is, so the ethos for Oregon State and Washington State is, I believe, markedly different than probably any other schools in the Pac-12, save maybe Utah. We're just different. We're Beaver fans and Cougar fans, and I'd say Ute fans to a certain degree, although Ryan might not agree with me. are just wired differently than UW or Oregon. I mean, not flashy. I mean, hell, orange is our color, and crimson is Wazoo's color. We're just wired differently. It's not getting all the money and getting all. That's just, I don't believe that's really what Wazoo and Oregon State's goals are.
No, they just want to be in the club. I don't think it has anything to do with money.
Well, I don't even know. I don't even know if it's that.
I think it is. It's got to be access.
Yeah, I think what they want. Sure, I think what they want is what's best for the student athletes.
Can I cut you off there really quick? So that leads up to this question. Clint Moses is an Oregon State guy. He's saying Beavs, Wazoo, win lawsuit. Best ACC teams join the SEC and Big Ten. Remaining ACC are absorbed into PAC and Big 12. Teams will be rumored to join PAC in a hurry. So he's saying the PAC reconstitutes itself, and once the ACC blows up, they'll pick schools up again. You're an Oregon State guy. Where would you rather see Oregon State and Washington State, in the Big 12 or in the ACC?
I think just what I know of the Big 12 and the Big 12 schools, I think, who we are, our character, and what we're made of. I mean, we match up. Our culture is a perfect fit for the Big 12. I firmly believe that. I'm worried about basketball because our basketball team is terrible, and we're just going to be a speed bump for most Big 12 teams.
Someone's got to lose.
They're not the only ones. So don't worry
but so was TCU. But so was TCU when they went to the Big 12. I mean, TCU was terrible even in the Mountain West, and when they got in the Big 12, after about 5, 6, 7 years, they begin to get their stuff together.
You underestimate our school. It was, I mean, Wayne Tinkle had a couple good years, and he's living high on the hog on that. Off of those couple good years, our basketball team. I mean, we were a basketball school, right? Up until
Gary Payton. Payton.
Up until the early 1990s, we were a basketball school. First round picks, all kinds of stuff. And then when Ralph Miller retired in '89 and Jimmy Anderson took over. He had one good year. We won the Pac-10 back then, and then we stunk ever since, for the most part.
Maybe you guys should hire Gary Payton as your head coach.
Yeah, Gary.
Gary.
We actually see him. Who we don't see is Chad Johnson. He never comes by for some reason.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me either.
Yeah, well,
that doesn't surprise me. Immaculate or Mullen, do you guys have a question?
I guess I'd say
you've been intently listening there. Quiet.
I've been listening, but I've also been trying to pay attention to chat because there's a lot going on, a lot of questions coming in.
Right.
I really kind of find myself looking at the mediation process as well. To me, it seems like that might actually be the main stage, if that makes sense to you. And all of the stuff going on with the court and motions, that's all kind of secondary, trying to affect that.
Yes.
We had a mention once again from Attorney Dave, and I'm going to lean on this again, talking about how everything in that mediation is confidential.
Yes.
And just how wide of a talk that could essentially be. Like, it doesn't necessarily just have to be about the PAC situation. They could be talking about more in there, couldn't they?
Absolutely. So mediations are the whatever said in the mediation, whether it be to the mediator or from the mediator to a party or whatever, as well as the information that's shared, is confidential, because to encourage parties to share information and talk and try and reach a settlement. What I always tell my clients when I go through mediation is the advantage to mediation is that if you go to court, you can get really one of two things. money damages, right? How big a check? And sometimes you can get the court to order somebody to stop doing something. Outside of that, that's largely what you're going to get out of in a civil context.
Mhm.
So the advantage to mediation is that if there are other things that you want
Mm-hmm.
or want to resolve,
That's where
you
we're
can
going.
do all of that in the mediation. And it's you sign a settlement agreement, which is contract. And so that's the advantage of mediation, is that you can craft a solution that you wouldn't be able to get in a court of law or court of equity. And so, yes, the mediation is really the meat and potatoes, and all of these hearings that are set and everything else, if they're making progress, they will push out all of those hearing dates. The court
Yeah.
will happily do that because
Nice.
the court would rather have them solve the problems themselves than
Yeah.
have Washington do it.
Well, they've
Right.
got a
And
big docket.
yeah, exactly. And then and yes, all of those conversations, all of that information would be confidential and not discoverable. So yeah. So I mean,
So how much, real quick, how much could outside parties in a way reach into this? Could they be called upon by, say, the mediator to put in? I'm basically thinking, the bigger problem, this has all created a bigger problem.
yeah.
CP, how much could negotiations that are wider ranging, like basically to get Oregon State and Washington State in somewhere, that's going to require other parties involved. How much could that play into this? I mean, could they be directly involved? Do parties that are in there have to reach out to them? Like, how does that work?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm saying is the settlement, the solution can be as broad or as narrow as the parties want. And if there are third parties, that maybe have something that they can add to help the settlement, and maybe become parties to the settlement.
But
Absolutely.
and would they be
not
known?
limited to just the parties in the lawsuit?
And would those outside forces that get invited in, would they be known, or is that all part of the? Would they be protected so no one would know that
They
happened?
would be known because in Oregon, a public entity cannot sign a settlement agreement, a confidential settlement agreement. So in Oregon, I'm not as well versed in Washington. I believe the law is the same in Washington, but I know in Oregon, if Oregon State signs a settlement agreement, and of course I think Oregon would sign it as well, that would be a public record.
Okay, so we would find out if this
Yeah.
became a much larger
Yeah.
settlement, like across the board. Okay.
Yeah.
So Doc Gibbs has got a question here, and this is something I asked a while ago. I don't think you were even on the show, but I've been surprised, really surprised, by how these two state legislatures who talk about being liberal and very protecting and all inclusive and all these other things, they're basically eating their young in these two legislatures. They're leaving these two schools out to die, and they're not getting any support. You're not hearing not Gavin Newsom, the coach, or who's the governor at Washington State?
Inslee.
Yeah,
Inslee.
oh my gosh,
Jay
Jay
Inslee,
Inslee.
yeah.
Talk about, yeah. Anyway, so how is this happening that these legislatures aren't doing everything they can to do their own little bit of mediation to protect these other schools, state schools?
So here in Oregon, we used to only meet, the legislature only met every other year, but now we meet in the odd years for like 6 months. In the even years, it's like 45 days or something.
Yeah.
So they're not in session. They're literally, they don't get paid squat. So they've all got their own jobs, and in any event, there are, I don't know this for sure, but I would expect that there are far more Oregon State alums in the Oregon legislature than there are Oregon alums. And so my guess is that they probably are paying attention but I used to be a lobbyist too, so I'm actually
Oh,
familiar
okay.
with our. I call it. It's a marble building. I call it the Marble Nut House.
Okay.
So I'm familiar with the Marble Nut House, and my if I had to bet my kids' college fund, I would say that the attorneys for Oregon State and probably the attorneys for Wazoo have told the legislature, don't do anything right now because we're in mediation and
Okay.
we don't want to do anything that's going to screw
Yeah.
that up.
Okay.
So, you know, I don't know who has more pull in the legislature between Oregon State and Washington State. Or excuse
Definitely
me, Oregon State
Washington.
and Oregon,
Oh
but
yeah, yeah.
and I don't know about Washington. I've
Oh no,
only been,
in the state of Washington, it's UW. They, I
yeah, it's
mean,
got to be, yeah,
yeah, they have all the power there. I mean,
yeah. I
that's where
don't.
the money is and the
I've only
influence.
lobbied up there a couple of times, and that wasn't what I was interested in. So,
So I got a
um,
comment here from Connor Jensen. He says, because you mentioned Utah as being one of the similar to Washington State and Oregon State. He says Utes and Beavs held down in defense of the Pac loyal to the point that they were trying to get 50 million instead of 30 million dollars or whatever for the conference. We're now a year plus into this, and you've now been observing this for a while. Where do you think this ends up, Bodie?
I think again, you know, I think that Pac or that Oregon State and Wazoo end up with the assets.
Okay.
And I think that the network and all that other fun stuff. Then I think, as far as the payout is concerned, I think what the way I would structure the settlement, or what I would for this year, I would, make the distributions what they normally would be,
Okay.
and then I would give the trader schools a very limited amount, um, portion, smaller share, moving forward based on the amount, it's a percentage of whatever actually comes into the Pac 12,
Okay.
so that we could so that Oregon State and Wazoo could use those funds to actually rebuild the Pac 12, to bring other schools in.
Okay.
And if after a period of time that money isn't used for that purpose, and say Oregon State goes to the Big 12, then that money would be distributed equally to all 12 schools, which would be an incentive for the other schools to put pressure on the networks to give the Big 12 schools more money,
Right.
so Oregon State could come. That's how I would do it. The other thing,
Okay.
I think this is just kind of as a nuance, is I wouldn't be surprised if UCLA says, we want you to cover our calimony as well.
Uh,
That wouldn't surprise me as well.
And what would be their legal recourse for that? Why would that even?
Uh, they would, in order to get out from underneath having to pay that, they would tell Cal, you get our slice and we're done.
yeah.
You get 50 million now as opposed to whatever it is, 10 million over the next 10 years.
Okay.
Because money now is more important than the money over time. So
Right. Okay.
that's what if I was UCLA, that's probably what I would do.
When
Okay.
you talk about like future money, you're talking about like NCAA credits. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah,
'Cause
that kind of stuff. Exactly.
yeah, because I think that they're required as it is under the bylaws to all get there's no exit penalties in the Pac-12. There's no exit
No.
fees, so everyone's going to get, after this academic year is over, and what is it, July 31st or whatever it is for the Pac-12, everyone's gonna get their distributive share
Correct.
of the earnings related to that. Which, I mean, to be honest, I don't know if there's even much. I don't. I would. I. I wouldn't to kind of require or ask for the NCA credits or units for moving thereafter. I mean, yeah, I mean they can mediate what they want, but there's not much precedent for that. I mean, when Maryland left the ACC, everything stayed there. Same with the Big East and
Right.
other things like that. So I mean, I think it's sort of you take your share of the money. I mean, the one thing I do see happening, the Pac-12 network has several feeds, and there's a main production facility, obviously in California, but each university, each school has its own assets. It's sort of like Immaculate and Moan will tell you if you go to a Big Ten stadium, you'll see there's a Big Ten network kind of facility at that stadium to handle the
Right.
local things. So I see in that case, with UCLA, USC, Cal, Stanford, I mean, those quote unquote assets will probably go with them because, there's no use for them to Oregon State or Washington
Yeah,
State.
but the university, the Pac-12 will get credit for them.
Yeah.
In other words, so you're absolutely right about that, and that's true. That's the way it is everywhere.
The broadcast rights are local, though. That's what Bob Thompson
yes.
said. He
Yeah.
said the Pac-12 negotiated with each individual school
Right.
and their locale to get broadcast rights, and so the network by itself, as an asset, again, going off of Bob's quote, he didn't think there was a ton there. He said there might be 10, 20 million, but
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
like it's some giant windfall of
Yeah.
$150
I
million
mean,
or something.
there's a couple things people need to be mindful on of the Pac-12. There's 7 feeds. There's one feed for every pair in a region, and then there's kind of an overall conference-wide feed. And the other thing people need to be mindful of is this broadcasting equipment. It ages. New things come out, becomes obsolete. I mean, it's just like computers, right? So I mean, this stuff is already probably heavily depreciated as it is. So the actual equipment itself, and hardware, software licenses, those also have to be renewed. I don't think there's necessarily much value in it, but I do think that I wouldn't be surprised if each school kept quote unquote their own respective feed that they have. But again, that's for them to figure out. I think the bigger issue is the Pac-12 or Oregon State and Washington State, and I would have to say that to them it's just like leave us something to rebuild with, and I think that that's probably going to be the, as Bodie said, in cases of equity. I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, Washington State and Oregon State have to be left with something to make themselves whole, or at least to be able to kind of move on with life. And I
Right.
mean, I think that that's kind of, if I'm certainly either a judge or the mediator, that's sort of kind of what I would look at is, what do these guys need to kind of make themselves whole and continue on? Because, whether it's, I know judges are impartial, or quote unquote they're supposed to be impartial, but there's also some policy influences and things on that. And certainly I don't think it's in the best interest for the state of Washington, for example, to have Washington State be like just neck deep in debt and have no way to service that. I mean, that doesn't really serve a policy interest.
Right.
And same with Oregon State. So I mean, I think at the end of the day, it is in the best interest that something is worked out to allow those two schools to either have a landing spot in another power, or I guess we want to call it a autonomy conference,
Yeah.
or at least have the resources to be able to manage their debts and pay their bills.
I'll tell you what, it does help to have a judge in Whitman County who was a past president of the Cougar Den up there.
Yes,
For
that's
Wazoo.
true. Why do you think they filed it in the Palouse and they
Oh,
didn't
Yeah, that's
leave?
right.
It's why you always want to be the one that
Yeah.
files first because you're deciding
Um,
where it's at.
Two more questions, and then we'll shut this thing down for tonight. First one is from David Griffin, and I think we know the answer, but I might as well ask it anyway. The liabilities, the Comcast thing, the Holiday Bowl, those are all being negotiated as well, right?
Oh,
They'll
sure.
probably end up being
Yeah.
split for all of them. Okay.
Yeah, that's going
All
to be a liability that everyone's going to
Okay.
pay.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
And that's going to come
And
out of
then-
this year's distribution. The Comcast
Okay.
liability is going to be paid out of this year's distribution.
Yeah.
And then Immaculate, did you have one more question?
Actually, I'm kind of filled up with all this. I'm trying to process
Okay.
still. So
All right.
Here's one thing I'll just, maybe a parting thought.
That's what I was going to say. Give us a final word. That's what I was going to say.
So they teach you in law school when you do your alternative dispute resolution, mediation, arbitration, those kinds of things, that if it's just a number, in other words, if the only dispute between the parties is a number, you're going to settle, because eventually you'll whittle each other down to something that everyone can agree with.
Right.
Nobody's going to be happy with it, but it's going to avoid the risk of litigation.
Yeah.
So if all we're talking about here is numbers, this will get settled. And I think that's largely what it is. Part of it was personal, for lack of a better term, right? Oregon State and Washington State, I think, I know I'm pissed that we're getting left behind. And that comes from decades of having Washington and Oregon and the rest of the schools say, why is Oregon State even in the Pac-12? Why is Wazoo in the Pac-12? And so it just kind of feels like a continuation of that disrespect. Once Oregon State and Wazoo get past that, which I think they have now, I think we'll get to a resolution. I think what will be telling is that hearing is scheduled for November 14th, I believe, is if it gets pushed back. If it gets pushed back, that means they're making substantial progress towards a settlement, whatever that might be.
So do you not put a whole lot of stock in that this could possibly be finished up this month? Do you think that is what we'll see as it gets pushed into next month?
Well, I think it will, but, to give you an example, I just finished not a extremely, but a complex contract involving a fraternity house, actually, at Oregon State. And that's taken us 2 months to get the language in the contract correct. So I wouldn't be surprised if they had an agreement in principle by the end of the month, but an actual, wet ink signature document, that's going to take a while, right?
Yeah.
Because
You have a binding term sheet, probably.
Yeah.
So as is pointed out in chat, the bill for the mediation is running. It's a running tab right now. So the fact, like he says, the fact that it's still going now is a good sign. But the longer this goes, that bill is just going up. So it behooves them to get this figured out sooner now that we know that there's actual talks going on and it didn't just fall apart quickly.
Somebody just said I knew Bodie was
a frat guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. We're gonna call that good, guys. We've gone 2 hours. Bodie, I really appreciate you being here.
Anytime, guys. I really love what you guys do. I'm a big fan.
Just remember, the key principle that will drive all of this, Bomber, is the phrase, to litigate is to lose.
Yes.
Okay. I believe that.
Okay.
I believe that to be true. And I try to avoid it as much as I can myself.
So, I mean,
anyway.
it's really in everybody's best interest to settle this amicably. I mean, that's really, going to the mat and blowing everything else up is not, and this goes beyond, as Immaculate and Moen have shared so, comprehensively before. This goes beyond just the Pac-12. I mean, this is bigger than, this is so much bigger than this.
We've been saying that for months, Ryan.
Yeah, and Monty, I know you're listening. Although you say you can't. But Monty never even reads my stuff. Even when I do pay chats for Monty, he won't read them.
I don't know. Why are you bringing him up? We don't even really talk about him here.
We're okay with Monty. Like I thought I was
nothing,
entertained immensely when I was there in chat for that.
I got nothing to do. Let's not do that. I don't want to.
Okay. All right. Well,
I think that's not what we do here. Okay, Ryan. You go to his show and and talk to him. All
No,
yours.
no,
all
no,
good.
no, no.
All
I'm
good.
just,
Okay.
I'm just saying that this is a bigger issue, and
I
think
know, and he
ultimately-
doesn't really care about the bigger issues. So
Yeah,
if it doesn't
yeah,
fit in a 4x8 headline, he doesn't want to talk about it. So
yeah, that's true. And
anyway,
also Utah fans and Michigan fans are wired the same. That's it.
oh yeah,
Okay.
all right. Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate that. Thanks for bringing that up. All right, we're gonna call that good. Bodie, I really appreciate you being here. You want to tell everybody what you do and where they can find you?
Sure. If you go to daylawpc.com, that's a little bit about my law firm. Or I'm Bodie McBoatface on
Love it.
Twitter, and I really appreciate it. I practice law here in my den during the day and stress out about Oregon State's next game in the evening. So.
Right. You guys finished strong, all right?
Hey, you beat Utah, so you got my love. You beat
Yeah,
Utah,
you beat
buddy.
Utah. That's all we care about around
That-
here.
Yeah, well, I just, we had 28 straight losing seasons, and I was there when we finally broke the streak.
Right.
And I've not ever since that night. I've had an unusually high level of anxiety over Beaver football.
Welcome
All right,
to
well-
Bomber Eyes world.
That's true. That's a fact. I appreciate everybody being here. What a fantastic show. Jim Williams was on at the beginning of the show 2 hours ago. If you want to
Yeah.
hear what Jim had to say about the ACC and then also the Pac-2 and the litigation, please watch that part of the show. Otherwise, follow all these guys on Twitter and make sure you turn on your notifications. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. Tell your friends and relatives. We have a great show. And yeah, we'll just catch you next time. We have no
Thanks,
show
guys.
tomorrow, but we do have a show Friday night at I believe it's going to be 7 p.m. Eastern time. So other than that, anybody else want to say anything before we go?
I'm good. That was a packed show. It was a good one. Appreciate everyone
Very
coming
good.
in. Great questions in chat and participation. So thanks everybody.
Great job,
Moen?
everyone.
Let's try this real quick.
Oh,
Because
no.
only one thing counts in this life. Get them to sign on the line which is dotted.
There we go. Ended with that.
And with that, everybody have a great night and peace out. We'll see you.
All right, take care.